I guess I was talking about the women in London when that other tape run out, but like I said, they would follow you around stating their price, and but as the evening wore on, the quality dropped off real bad and the price went way down, so you could take your choice. Not that I did. Well, in London we did go out to Wimbledon. I can't remember how we got there or what, but it was somewhere outside of London. That's where they have the big tennis championships and stuff, but they had buildings out there that they had kind of dances and parties going on out there. We went out there a couple of times. I had a friend in Elmwood. He lost an arm when he was a kid, but he kept in track with all the servicemen. He was very faithful at writing everybody, and I got a letter from him one time, and he says Dale McLaughlin had been wounded in Europe, and he was in London in some hotel recuperating. He was out of the hospital, but he was there recuperating, and so he gave me his address. So I went into London one morning. About 10:30, I got in this building, and I don't know how many stories I went up, and there were guys in bunk crowded in there. Walked in there about 10:30, and here's Dale laying there sound asleep, and I poked him, and he saw this officer looking at him, and he jumped out of there and started to salute me, and he realized who it was, and so we had a good time and messed around in London, and so I took him back out to the air base with me. He got a day or so off, and I said, we were a deputy lead crew, so we had to fly. Somebody had to fly our plane every day to make sure it was ready to go, whoever was going to fly it. And so we were going up for a check ride, and I talked Dale into going along. Well, I guess he had gotten into something when he got wounded. I don't know, he was in a plane or something, and they were ferrying him back, and it had to ditch, and it got, I don't know, it shot down or had trouble, and I had to set down over in Europe. So he was really kind of a basket case at that time. But so he decided to go along, and we took him out to the plane. We had him stand right up behind us there in the catwalk right behind us, and we got the thing all checked out and started up, and we taxied out to the end of the runway, and we always checked our mags one more time before on all engines before we took off, and one of them dropped off a little bit, so we thought, well, we better go back and get it checked. And we were still rolling. We weren't even stopped yet, and the guy in the waist called. I don't know who, somebody called me from the waist, and he says, "Your buddy just jumped out," and before it even stopped rolling. And he says he's headed for the, I don't know where they said, but he was gone. Oh, Dale, I don't know how he got back to London or how he got to Sudbury, but he made it back. But after we got home, I always kidded him, and he said, well, he said, I just stood behind you, and I said, you didn't think there was any way that a little guy like me could get that thing off the ground. So he bailed out. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of other places we saw in London, London Tower and all this and that, London Bridge, and there's a lot of parks, Hyde Park and stuff. We had nice days, we'd mess around at those. And of course, had a lot of pubs. A lot of the guys hung out in those a lot of the time too. But it was a very interesting place. And this is a copy of a program from the Windmill Piccadilly Circus, and this shows you where it was. There's Piccadilly Circus, and there's the Windmill Theater right off of Piccadilly Circus there. Now we'll get back to the missions. I'll read you Kelly's report. Mission number 3, 14th of March, 1945. Target oil refinery, Nijmegen, northeast of Hanover, Germany. Bombed visual. Altitude 23,000 feet. Flak negligible. A nice mission today. Late briefing and takeoff. was expecting a rough target, but was really a milk run for our group. No flak at all except at the target, and they only saw 4 bursts, none near. However, the group which bombed the marshalling yards at Hanover really caught hell. We could see them from our target and could tell they were catching plenty of hell. Those flak gunners laid a barrage of flak which looked like a pan of popcorn popping, only it was black and wicked looking. That gang got hell shot out of them. No fighters or flak on return, and everything okay until got back to the base, and the visibility was so low you couldn't see the field. What a rat race that was. 36 ships buzzing around in the fog, and all trying to land at the same time. We were lucky. We circled the field at 300 feet 3 times trying to find the runway. When we did see it, we were right on top of it and didn't have time to make a normal approach. However, Ward made a beautiful landing. That's worse to sweat out than the flak. Was pretty glad to get the feel of the good old Mother Earth. Well, Kelly had it part right. He didn't quite understand what was going on, but we did. When you come back and it was completely socked in, you would circle around. They had a buncher out there, and you would got your turn. We had to circle 3 times before we got to our turn to peel off and go down. And you try to go over that buncher and at a certain altitude, and then you'd start your descent at a certain rate of descent and at a certain speed. And if you did that just right, and there weren't any crosswinds or anything, well, you would come out at the end of the runway. And at the end of the runway, they had a big magnesium flare lit. And if you got down to less than 100 feet and couldn't spot that flare, why, you might as well pick up and go around and try it again. But we picked up the flare on the first time, but we were off to the side. But Bert slipped it real quick and got it in, and but he did run off the runway a little bit on one side. But we didn't have all the sophisticated landing situations that they've got nowadays, but we were kind of on our own. My little notes on that one was a target northwest of Hanover, milk run, saw only 4 bursts of flak, missed the target, bad fog on landing, ran off to the right of the runway, no damage. We left England at South Hold, I believe that's the name of it, on clear down here, headed back up here. And there's the IP point. That's where we start our bomb run, right in over there. Dropped our bombs there. Came back on out. You can see how they picked the routes between all the flak areas. Okay, this is the sheet on our 3rd mission, my 2nd. On this mission we flew in the low squadron, which is right over here on the left, just below the lead squadron, which is right there. And we flew 3rd back on the right hand side. I think I mentioned before that after we dropped the bombs, then we'd always descend some. That way, a lot of the times the squadrons would spread out to the sides and so forth. And as long as we started to descend, in this case we descended from 25,000 down to 20,000, and that gave us time for the other planes, because that way, and when you were descending and they went down at the same speed, that was a lot easier for all the rest of the planes to get back, slide back into formation. And then I don't know what that point, that gives it a location. Then we descended to 16,000 feet for the rest of the trip home. On this mission, we had sea channel guard. We had, and that was listening to the fighters, and that was our name, B.D. Ward. Our aircraft had to guard that channel the whole mission. One of us had to stay on that. I thought I might stick a couple of pictures in here. I don't know how clear they'll be, but this is a shot of our formation after it's grouped up and is on its way on a mission. But you can see how much condensation trails are put out by each plane. So I think you can imagine what it would be for 2,000 of them milling around over a little area in England trying to get assembled, sometimes in the dark in the mornings, and that was a real tough go. But those condensation trails are caused by supercooled air, and when the propellers and so forth churn it up, why it turns it to ice or condensation, not ice, to condensation, and it's just like a cloud, and then you form it. And it's a beautiful thing to see, especially when the sun's coming up through those planes, and or sunset late in the afternoon, and see all those planes, thousands of them coming back with all those big condensation trails. This doesn't happen at all altitudes. You'll just run into it at different altitudes, and most of the time we were up high enough. Once we got out of England and on our mission, we would fly at an altitude with the best prevailing winds that we could find, and also that was all figured out ahead of time. They'd have send planes out ahead and try and figure out the altitudes that would be the best flying altitude, and with no condensation trails. Another term you've probably heard me use a few times is barrage flak. That's when they just saturate an area that the group was going through. Now that was probably this. Can you see this area right here? Right there. See, now there's another group of, drop my picture. Now this area here, another group was probably gone through there ahead of us, and they really caught heck there on that one. But I'll show you another picture here where they're after a certain plane. Okay, on this picture down here, see, they're after that guy. See, they're targeted on him, and there's bursts right around him. Okay, here's another one. See, they're right after him. The other thing I explained about their guns, they did not have a proximity fuse, which would get, some of them would get so close to a metal or something would go off, but they didn't have that. They had to set that anti-aircraft shell at a certain altitude before they fired it. And that's the way we would change altitude, or we drop out chaff. I guess maybe I mentioned chaff, but it's metal strips of different sizes and shapes that our waist gunners would throw out, and they had a certain time to throw it out and a certain area to throw it out. A lot of times we'd come over and the sky below us was just absolutely saturated with shell fire, and they were shooting at the flak, or at the flak, or shaft, I guess I call it. It's at the aluminum shaft. Okay, another thing you heard me talking about with the radar bomb sights, the lead plane of the whole group would have a radar bomb sight that he could bomb through the clouds, where we couldn't with the northern bomb sights. So whenever he triggered his first bomb, was a smoke bomb, and then all of our bombardiers or armor gunners would start all other 30-some planes would start their bombs at the same time. Now, this is a smoke bomb that went down, but it's not ours. Ours would have come out of this lead plane right here. But this is a smoke bomb from a group that has been by ahead of us. You can see that they were at a higher altitude than we were. But that's what it looks like, and except it's not spread out that much. But it's very easy to see the minute it goes why the guys would all toggle their bombs. This is what we definitely don't like to see. That's a plane out of our group. He's been hit, he's blown up, and he's on his way down. But then everybody in the group was supposed to try to count shoots, and so they know who might have survived. Over at this, let's see, well, I'm not in there, I can move over there. It kind of looks like it might be a propeller right there, one of the props going off there, probably off that number 2 engine. But over here, you can see a string of bombs coming down from another, probably in our group, that he got his bombs off and got away free, I guess. As you can see, we're above broken clouds that day. Yeah, that's just a shot of one of the pretty old birds going by. On this mission, the bombs were salvoed. That's when you dump all of them at once. And in that other picture, you saw them in a big train. They call that in a train. And that can be set at any interval, depending on what kind of a pattern they want on the ground. So that would just spread it out over a lot wider pattern if you increase the interval that they drop. The bomb racks were all, you could be set for whatever you wanted. Of course, I didn't go on the first mission, but our second mission was 7 hours in the air, and the third mission was 7 hours and 10 minutes of flying time. I'm getting kind of old, but I can't remember what I've got on these tapes so far and what I haven't. This is a flying jacket that I got when I flew the Experimental Aircraft Association B-17 aluminum overcast. It came to Omaha a few years back, and I got to fly it for 20 minutes. Got a ride and then flew it myself 20 minutes. But this is the jacket I got with the deal. This here is my 833rd Bomb Squadron patch, a bomb out of hell. And this is an EAA patch that I got with the jacket. This is the 486 Bomb Group patch. When the group went over to England, like I told you, it was B-24s and they had the square W. When they went to B-17s, they went to, it was a square O when they went over the 24s. When they went to 17s, they changed it to the square W. Oh yeah, this was a regular 8th Air Force patch. When I got the jacket, it came with the regular Air Force patch, not the 8th Air Force patch. On the back is a real neat embroidered B-17G. That shows a leather patch on there showing my wings. That's a little metal B-17 sticker, my name, and the aluminum overcast, the name of the airplane. Okay, mission number 4. It was 7 hours and 25 minutes in the air, 15th of March 1945. Target, marshalling yards. Brandenburg, Germany, 20 miles north of Berlin. Big B. Bomb visual. Altitude 22,400 feet. Flak moderate to intense. This is it, our first trip to Big B, Berlin. Hundreds of flak guns. Our target, a railroad yard where a lot of troops and equipment are being marshaled for transfer to the Western Front. This was our longest mission so far. Nothing unusual on the trip over, no flak or fighters. Flak at the target was moderate for our squadron, but intense for the lead squadron. Had several near bursts, but received only one small flak hole near the radio compartment in the right wiring route, on the right wing route. Having a little trouble with this, it's fading out over the years, so I'm glad I'm trying to get through it. Robinson's crew, who came over with us and went through training with us, got direct hits, one in the number 2 engine and one in the bomb bay. Result, over 400 flak holes. The record for our group. He managed to stay in formation and returned okay. Our number 2 engine ran rough and threatened to go out, but we nursed it along and kept it going. No flak or fighters on return. Saw a B-24 blow up and a B-17 go into a spin and disappear in the haze. No parachutes seen from either. March 16, 1945, mission to Russian line was scrubbed. 17th of March, squadron stand down. 18th of March, up for 5th mission today, was a good one too. Big B, but lost an engine after takeoff and had to abort. My little note from the 15th of March, 45. Just to the edge of Big B, Berlin. One flak hole down through the wing. Saw a B-24 blow up. Robinson got shot up, but good. Might add a little bit to this. It's Robinson's crew. We knew them real well, but they didn't really get shot up. And our planes, of course, had oxygen bottles. They're kind of like a size of a, I think you've probably all seen them. We make a lot of air compressor tanks out of them. Nowadays, but one of those got hit and it blew up inside of the cockpit and kind of knocked them silly for a little bit, but it blew all the padding off of the walls of the inside of the plane in that area, and they looked like they'd been in a big pillow fight with that mess that they, when we went over and looked at their plane after we got back. Oh, then we mentioned the B-24. I think it was from the 15th Air Force out of Italy, and they'd come in across Berlin from the south, and this guy was really shot up bad, and he come wobbling off of there, and he got right in front of our group and just exploded. And I never seen anything disintegrate. There just, you could hardly see anything but just trash flying through there, and it really kind of brought the war home to us. This is the map for this mission. There's Amsterdam right down here. So we come in south of north of Amsterdam, came almost straight across, jogged through the flak areas, get over here and we jogged south, come in and hit our target right north of Berlin. This is the solid flak area around Berlin, which is right there. Hit our target right there, back up and around, and then took our same route back home again. Okay, this is a briefing sheet, one side of it, but today we flew in the high squadron, just above the lead squadron. And here we are, second back on the left-hand side. I guess I haven't even talked much about our air base, but that's the layout of the air base. Each squadron had an area for to park their planes. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't remember now which was our squadron, but that's north that way, and this is the main runway. And I don't ever remember ever using anything but this long runway. We had to have that long one to get off. They had us loaded, so we had to use that runway or never make it. I do remember though, if we were coming down, usually we were taking off this direction, and there was kind of a dip in the runway right in this area. You go through that dip and come out of that dip, and you better be flying when you come out of that dip or you're in deep trouble. Yeah, as Kelly just mentioned there a minute ago, he said on the 18th, up for a 5th mission today, was a good one to Big B, but lost an engine after takeoff and had to abort. Yeah, that's right, but I can add a little to that. After we took off, I think that we were just we'd taken off and climbed at assembly altitude, and we're trying to get lined up with our squadron, and well, I was sitting there and all, it just went kerbang, and the whole plane just shook, just like an explosion. And then it run all right, and a little bit later, kerbang, it did it 3 or 4 times, and so we didn't want to head out on a 10-hour mission or more, and with an engine acting up. But boy, when you aborted a mission, you better have good reason for it, because that would happen earlier on. They get a mission to Berlin, nobody wanted to go, so they would abort. But so we aborted and went back. Boy, we landed, they had a half a dozen Jeeps and stuff around us and wanted to know why we came back, and we told them what was wrong, and they took us into briefing and pumped us, and then they even took the listed men in separately, you know, to see if we all had the same story, and that they had heard the noise. But it was running rough then too. It started running rough, so we feathered it and came back on 3 engines. But we went to briefing and we told them about it, and they weren't buying it at all. So they said, well, you'll have to pull that engine. So they pulled that engine. Sure enough, one of the pistons had collapsed the metal between the piston rings, and so I don't know what was going on, but anyway, we got out of that one all right, because we never could have possibly made it on 3 engines on that long of a mission. But you know, like I say, when you aborted, you better hang on to your hat if you didn't have a good reason. Okay, mission number 5. 19th of March, 1945. This was a 10-hour mission again, 10 hours in the air. Target Motorworks, Zwickau, Germany. Schemenetz area. Bomb PFF, altitude 22,500. Flak, meager to nil. This was the longest haul yet, 10 hours in the air, rough. Mission all fouled up too. Only flak encountered was near Frankfurt on the Main, as we went near there on the way to the target. Target was near Dresden, Germany, about 60 miles from Russian lines. Got to IP, that's the initial point where you turn on to the bomb run, of the primary target, and found target overcast, so we had to turn to secondary priority target. First priority target had to be bombed visually, as PFF couldn't pick it up. In other words, the radar bomber couldn't pick up the target, and we couldn't bomb it visually, so we had to go to the second target. Turned around and went back south to secondary. This added about an hour to our mission. Had no flak at the target. Was a milk run as far as as flak is concerned, but its length made it rough. Ran low on gasoline and had to drop out of the formation after crossing western front lines to conserve precious petrol. Really had me sweating on the way back. Landed with the tanks practically dry. Gauges showed about 50 gallons, while a B-17 consumes about 200 gallons an hour. Close enough for me. Now, after we added all that time, after we got away from the target, we had to drop our formation, because in formation flying, everybody's jocking on the throttles back and forth, and you use a lot of gas. And airplane is about like similar to a boat. If you've ever run a boat, you can plow along through the water until you get it up and get it to planing, and then it scoots right along with less power. Well, that's the same way with an airplane, and at 150 miles in formation, you were plowing most of the time. But when you get by yourself, we called it getting it on the step. You'd bring it up and speed it up until you felt it go up on the step, and it would kind of take off. And you got on the step, then you would back off on the throttles just as far as you could, and fly with the least amount of power, and still keep it on the steps for the most gas mileage. And of course, it was up to Kelly to keep calculating how much gas we should have, so he was sweating it out pretty good. I know we wouldn't have made it back if they'd have stayed in formation. My little one-liners again, 19th of March, 45, Zwickau. 10 hours in the air. Had to drop out of formation to have enough gas, which made it a very rugged mission. Okay, here's our sheet again. This time we're back over here in the low squadron, second back. But here's low squadron, high squadron, or lead, high, and low. But something interesting today, they've added 3 more planes. Now they're going to go up. Some other group couldn't put up enough planes. They'd probably got shot up the day before, so they're going to send 3 planes over and fly with them. They're going to go over and join the 447th bomb group, so they'll have to go up and watch for flares and find them and get it going with them. This shows our route again. There's Brussels right there. We come in down here, over here, took a trip in. We approached the target from the south, turn around, come back out, and join the same route, come back out here farther north. Okay, mission number 6. 5 hours and 10 minutes. 21st of March, 45. The target, airport at Marx, Germany, Wilhelmshaven area. The airport was based Ju-88s, or Junkers 88s, and German airplanes, jets. A milk run. Wished I had 29 more like this. Took off at 6:30 after a 3:30 briefing, and was back on the ground at noon. Only 5 hours. Only 5 hours. Well, he was off by 10 minutes. That's pretty good for Kelly. Crossed the North Sea and entered from the northwest. Hit our target and out due west. Only over enemy territory approximately an hour and a half. Was expecting plenty of flak and possibly fighter opposition, but saw only a few bursts of flak and a couple of fighters. The flak was quite a distance off, and about 18 P-51s took care of the fighters. I say again, a milk run. More of this. My notes again, Marx, Germany, bombed an enemy airfield. Milk run. On this mission, we only put up 3 squadrons. lead, high, and low. But in this case, they put an extra plane in the tail in this formation to fill up the box in the center, and on each of these back squadrons. This time we flew back here, fourth back in this squadron, and they made these squadrons, 2 planes, longer. They added 2 more planes, plus they put in the box on each of them. And you can see this is a lot shorter mission than farther north. Here's Amsterdam, clear down here, and I think we came in from the north and crossed down in here. There's Eamon, and there's Wilhelmshaven right up there. So you can see that was a shorter mission for a change. Okay, mission number 7. 5 hours in the air. 22nd of March, 1945. Target, German troop encampment near Essen, Germany, in the Ruhr Valley. Happy Valley, everybody called it. Bombed visual. Altitude 23,000 feet. Flak moderate. Another short mission, but can hardly say it was a milk run. Far from it. Target was just across the Rhine, about 10 or 15 miles from the lines. Was only over the enemy territory about 15 minutes, but it was a lifetime. Flak picked us up just before we got to the target and held us until we got out of range on the return from the target after bombs away. Flak was bursting all around our plane. They seemed to have had us in their sights. We had several near bursts, one much too close for me. One piece went about the size of my fist, went through the nose right between Don, the nose gunner, and myself. It entered from 2 o'clock on the left side of the fuselage, just above Don's head, and went out in 2 pieces, just above the navigator's table. In fact, I had just moved from the path of the flak about a minute before. I had been standing behind Don watching the target and moved back to the navigator's chair to take instrument readings at the time of bombs away. The flak went out the left side, and one piece hit the cowling of number 2 engine, and one piece the cowl flap, and punctured an exhaust stack, which, if we hadn't been lucky, could have been a fatal explosion. The punctured stack almost burned a gas line in 2, rough enough for me. We didn't know about that gas line until we got back, but it could have been disaster. And he finishes off with PFF. In other words, he would a lot rather bomb above the clouds where they can't shoot at us visually. Yeah, let you know where we are. Here's Antwerp and Brussels right there. So we come in here, up across here, there's where we bombed, and there's Dusseldorf, and there's Essen right there. Made a sharp turn and come back to England. I guess kind of neglecting this, but here's your enemy lines. This is where the battle lines were at that time. So we were just over across there a ways. Here again we had this different squadron. We had 3, 6, 9, 10 in the lead squadron, and in the high and the low we had 3, 6, 9, 12, and then the one in the to fill in the box on each one of those. So I had 13 on each of those. There again, then we sent 3 planes with the 94th bomb group. They had to hook up with them and go. Here's my short deal again. Essen, Germany. German barracks. Really flat clay pigeons. I'll talk about that a minute later. We're really lucky. One piece of flak went over Don Simmons' head and just in front of Kelly. From there it hit the number 1 and 2 engines, puncturing the stack, burned the gas line. Very lucky. The engine didn't burn. 15 to 30 odd holes in the ship. Visual run in Happy Valley. But I mean, it said really flat clay pigeons. We kind of found out later that one of the reasons they sent us there was to pinpoint all of the flak gun emplacements. So they just thought we used us as to draw their fire and they could locate all of them. But that didn't go over very big when we kind of found that out. March 24th and the 25th went on pass. 26th of March. Upon return from pass, we were notified we had been elected for deputy lead crew. This was a foul blow. Lead crew means more work, more responsibility, and no more promotions. I was really teed off. This means more work and responsibility than I wanted. Of course, it will cut our missions down to probably 30 instead of 35, but that isn't enough for the worry it will cause me as navigator. March 27th, practice mission. I had to be checked out on forming the group. March 28th, another practice mission scheduled, but weather interfered, so we all sacked in. Mission number 8, 7 hours flying time. 30th of March, 45. Target, oil storage yards, Hamburg, Germany. Upper Happy Valley. Bomb PFF plus visual aid. Altitude 22,500. Flak intense. This was our first mission as a deputy lead crew. It was a pretty rough mission even from beginning. Hamburg is never and never will be a milk run. No trouble until we reached the target. Had an undercast until we reached the target. That I always like. That's so that they can't shoot at you visually. On the bomb run, the clouds broke right over the target, so we had a visual run on the target. Also, the ever-present flak. The flak was very ineffective until we broke out into the clear. Then they started tracking us visually, and then they got damn close. Too close. Had very good results on the target. Could see huge fire raging and saw 2 large oil reservoirs burst into flames, which leaped a mile high. This really a beautiful sight to behold. This was one of Jerry's ace-in-the-hole reservoirs. Right after bombs away, the flak gunners began to get our range. The SOBs were tracking us and was getting damn close when the plane immediately behind us and just below us ran in smack into a burst and burst into flames. She blew up a few seconds later. Believe me, I'm still shaking from that incident. The boys in that plane, Veal's crew, came over with us from Alexandria, Louisiana. I had been through my entire training with Don Johns, the navigator. It was really a blow. And I was real close to the co-pilot, Otis. Otis Rubel. After the target, everything was okay again, except we had to go down on the deck, coming back across the North Sea to avoid a squall. A little more on that mission. After you go back, you have to go to briefing, well, first, I never mentioned, Red Cross truck was there, and you gotta, if you wanted, you got a shot of cognac, and then you had to go to briefing, and they would really brief you on everything. They briefed the enlisted men separately. Maybe I've repeating myself. But anyway, in the briefing, nobody in the whole group saw any chutes get out of that Beale's crew. But our tail gunner, Ray Brzezinski, he says, I saw one real down close to the ground, and maybe two. But nobody ever believed him. But this past summer, I've got a neighbor at home by the golf course there. He's got a World War II nut. He brought over this article of some Eastern War Journal. And there was an article in there titled something like "Being Shot Down in a B-17." And he says, maybe would you want to read it? And he says, it's a 486 bomb group. And I says, that's mine. And he said, it is. He says, you don't know Don Johns, do you? And I said, I sure do. He was a navigator on the crew that got shot down right below us one day. And I says, I didn't think he made it. But he wrote an article after he was shot down. Of course, he was taken prisoner, but he had no records. But he wrote this whole article about being shot down and so forth, and how he came to falling through the air and pulled his ripcord just before he hit the ground. But he wrote this article, so and it said he lived in, gosh, I've forgotten now, North Carolina, I believe. I forgot the town now. So I got on the phone and got a number, and called him, and it was the same guy, and he made it, and the tail gunner made it, because it blew him. See, he was right in the nose, and the tail gunner was right in the tail, and when it blew up, it blew those guys both out, one off the tail and one off the nose. So, but he was taken prisoner then, and of course, when he got home, we all carried our own records, so he had no records or anything, but he wrote a real nice article, and there's a few things off, dates and so forth, but I got his phone number and called him and told him who I was, and he just couldn't believe it. He says, after 57 years, he says, I didn't think I'd ever talk to anybody that knew anything about our plane getting shot down, or could get any details. So we had quite a conversation, and then I got together quite a packet of all our orders where we moved from different places, training and so forth, and when we went across and the whole bit. So he was really appreciative of that, but it's kind of a 1 in a million shot after 57 years. Yeah, we came in south and crossed on up, and right there's Hamburger. You can see right in the center of a huge flak area. Went on up north and back out over the North Sea. There's Heligoland up there. That's out in the North Sea. That's where Kelly said we run into a squall and had to get down on the deck to get home. Okay, this time we flew the Lolo Squadron, and here we are right here. This is the lead crew. Actually, they flew right out in front of us. They printed these backwards, but we flew deputy lead and would have taken over lead if something had happened to them. But now you can look right here. Here's the Veal crew. They were flying directly behind us and then just below. My little notes. 30th of March. Hamburg, oil target. Veal, Odie, and Jones got it today. Direct flak hit, blew up. One chute got out, according to Brzezinski. jet blowjobs attacked. Leo was directly under us and they were tracking us when he got hit. If you remember back when I was talking about our crew, sometimes we took a spot jammer, or most of the time we had a spot jammer with us. And he had all his radio equipment in the waist, and he'd dial across all the radio signals for the German guns, and when they'd find a signal, they'd jam it. But our tail gunner, Brzezinski, says, as I remember, he kept saying, well, they're locked on to us or something, because he could see the flak bursts would start way back, and they'd just walk up and get closer, closer, and closer until they would get right to us. And well, they got to Veal, and we suspicioned something was wrong, but we got to thinking about it, and because Brzezinski has been telling us this, so the next time we went on a mission, I went and told the spot jammer, I said, if I call back to one of these guys back here, because he wasn't on, he was on his set, he couldn't hear her, but if I call one of the crew and I says, and they tell you to shut that thing off, you shut it off. Well, he started arguing with me, and I says, you better shut it off or they're going to shut you off, one of our crew, because we think that they're locking on to yours, they'll lock on to your signal and really go after us. So we tried that, and sure enough, I don't remember what mission it was, but I think they were coming up, they'd locked on and were coming after us, and we told them to shut it off, and the shell stopped. I'll have to check with Brzezinski on that, but I think that was about the way it went. The Germans were smarter than we thought they were. There was always one step ahead of us. Okay, mission number 9. We were 8 hours in the air, 31st of March, 1945. Target military vehicle plant near Brandenburg, Germany, 30 miles from Big B, Berlin, of course. We bombed PFF radar, altitude 23,200, flak meager to nil. This was a mission after my own heart. More and more like it. It was a long haul, but thanks to the doughboys on the rampage across the Rhine, the route has been shortened. Was thin undercast entire trip from something back to the North Sea. Bomb blind and had only a few bursts of flak, very far off. How I love these type missions. Glad they flew us today to take yesterday's accident off my mind. Those boys have been on my mind constantly. My little Leely, 31st of March, 1945, Brandenburg. Bombed PFF. Bombed the middle of the town, so that would be probably where that plant was. And I got to know blowjobs in the area. The blowjobs we call the German jets. But we didn't see them, but we could hear them on our radios that somebody had reported seeing them in the area. On this mission we flew deputy lead again in the low squadron, right here. I guess maybe I've mentioned that when we flew deputy lead, we always had Bert Ofiera along. He was a bombardier that they signed to us when we flew deputy lead. In case we had to take over, we'd have a bombardier that could drop the bomb visually. April 1st, 1945. Not up for operations today. Can't understand it. Have been off for almost a week now and have flown only 2 missions. Have an idea. They are getting us off of operations for lead crew training. I don't want this and will leave the crew before I'll take the job. There's nothing but worry and a hell of a lot of responsibility to the job. No thanks. Deputy lead is as far as I want to go for first lieutenant. Well, I might talk about that just a little bit. Kelly definitely didn't want to go to lead crew training. Bert wanted to be a lead crew pretty bad, but I definitely didn't want it either, and I was with Kelly, and we both agreed that we would ask to get off the crew if they wanted to go for lead crew training, and I'm sure they wouldn't have taken them without Kelly, because he was what they were after, I'm sure. And so that's kind of the way that situation stood, and we were anxious to get our missions in as soon as possible and get home. And over there, it's kind of a rule of thumb, if you volunteered for missions and stuff, it was bad luck. So we were ready to go on and get our mission done and go home. 2nd of April, well, there's one other thing. If we'd gone lead crew, usually the lead plane would have a pilot riding in the tail gun position, and he would monitor the whole group as far as who was going on, what was going on, who was flying good formation and all that. And I was scared to death that I would either be dropped off the crew or probably have to fly that position, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be flying and not riding in the tail gun position. 2nd of April, 1945. Still off operations. Can't figure it out. No mention of PFF, but no missions. PFS would be the lead crew training. However, yesterday and today's missions were scrubbed due to weather. This is our route in this time. I can't see any towns listed on there. I just can't read them anymore. We'll come on in here, on up to the target, and then back out here. That direction. Kind of might be something else that might show you. This is the battle line. This is the Allied battle line right here. It went up around there. Came back down around there. Back up here. And back out here somewhere. But over on this side, here is the Russian battle line over here. Mission number 10. Kelly's got in parentheses, Big 10. We were really counting them. 4th of April, 1945. We were near 6 hours and 35 minutes. Target, dock facilities at Kiel, Germany. That's right up on the North Sea, right on the coast there. Bomb PFF, radar through the clouds. Altitude 23,500, flak moderate. This was briefed as the second roughest target on the continent, but thanks to a beautiful 910 undercast of clouds, it was a milk run. Our first priority target was a refueling station for the naval units, but due to weather conditions, we had to bomb second priority target, which was dock facilities in the same general area of Kiel. Had a nice tailwind over the target, so we breezed over it at about 300 miles an hour. The flak over the target was moderate but very inaccurate, thanks to the chaff that we dumped out. The defenders were shooting our chaff off to the left and 2,000 to 3,000 feet below us. My notes 4th of April 1945, Kiel. Bombed secondary PFF dock area. 80 guns could bear on us, plus 21 naval guns. Lucky it was PFF, as there was a lot of barrage flak, of inaccurate barrage flak. 100-mile-an-hour tailwind going, which made a long, tiresome trip home. Blowjobs reported in the area again. I might explain that tailwind a little bit. Our trip over, there's always prevailing west to east winds, and so our always trip over to Germany was faster than our trip home, and that's when you get in trouble with gas problems, especially if the wind picked up by the time you went home. But there it was, we had a 100-mile-an-hour wind that we were bucking going home. Yeah, see, I guess I said that was 6 hours and 35 minutes. Guess I didn't quite finish Kelly's notes on this. There's another page here. This was a long haul over water. We were over land and in enemy territory only about an hour though. I love these PFF missions. Kelly loved the clouds. Yeah, we're quite a ways north again this time. You can see here, this is Amsterdam, clear down here. Here's Hamburg, clear up here. We come in here and across. That was our primary target there. That was our secondary target. And we come around and come on back out. Okay, we're flying deputy lead again in the Lolo squadron. Here we are right here. So Ofiera would have been with us again on this one. I think there's one ahead of before I started mentioning. This is probably his third trip with us right here. Mission number 11, 9th of April, 45. 7 hours and 30 minutes in the air. Target, jet airfields, Nuremberg, Munich area, Germany. Bomb visual, altitude 23,000. Flak none. The nicest mission I have flown. A milk run from start to finish. A beautiful day, clear as a crystal, all the way. Flew across France at only 4,000 and did not climb to altitude until almost to the battle lines. This was an excellent opportunity to see the destruction wrought by our bombings. Town after town, city after city, literally leveled to the ground. Nothing standing but hulls. Was really a sight. Target was flak free, and we had a perfect visual run on the target. Our bombs were blowing hell out of the runways. Previous bombings had taken care of the barracks and other installations. Again, I say a milk run. Give me 19 more like it and I'll fly every day. Saw the Alps Mountains over near the target, which was about 60 miles from the Swiss border. Mine says 9th April 45, Nuremberg Airfield, milk run. First time they didn't throw flak at us. I can't remember whether this was a mission. Well, I'll get the map up here first and we'll have a look at it. Yeah, we come straight in here, right by Brussels, Mannheim, and there's our target right there. There's Nuremberg right north of there. We come around in that way and then straight back out and jogged up there. But I started saying a minute ago, I don't think that was a mission, but I'll get on to it later about the Alps Mountains. Yeah, here we are, right up here, deputy lead for the whole group this time, so Berniofa area would have been along again. Now today, we only put up 2 squadrons, and the low squadron didn't go, but the low squadron was furnished by the 447th bomb group, so we would have gone up and they would have formed in and went over with us on that mission. Okay, this was my actual 11th mission. I didn't go on our crew. I flew with another crew, the Jackson crew. That way it caught me up with the rest of the crew so we'd all have the same number of missions. It was the 14th of April, 1945. We flew to Bordeaux, France. It was a gun stronghold. Flew with the Jackson crew. Had close one on takeoff. We lost number 3 engine on the way home. Didn't hurt anything though. It was a 7-hour, 10-minute mission. I flew with the Jackson crew, and I guess I never realized how inept some of the pilots were, but he didn't bowl me over because it was a foggy morning and we had little bitty runway lights. You could hardly see them, but they were there. And he was taking off, and boy, we got halfway down the runway and he started running over the lights. He was off at the edge of the runway, and thank goodness he shut her down and got it stopped before we run off the end of the airfield. And he was telling me, well, I couldn't see those lights. And well, I offered to take it off the next time, but I guess he was too much pride, and he did get it off that time. But man, that scared the heck out of me. I didn't think we'd get her stopped in time. But Bert said he went down to the field that morning, was up in the tower when we were taking off, and somebody said, well, they didn't get off the ground, and he wondered what happened. But I told him what was going on when I got home. But I told him, don't you ever let me go with Jackson again. Now, I think, as I remember, that engine got to running real rough, and it wasn't too long a mission. There would be no problem getting back with it, so we just feathered it and came on back. Yeah, well, of course, I don't have any map on this one because the navigator, the ones that carried those little maps, I got all those from Kelly. But here's the Jackson crew right here. We were second back in the center there on the low squadron. Mission number 12, 16th of April, 1945. 7 hours in the air. Target, tank troops, Bordeaux, France, southern France. Bomb visual, altitude 15,000, flak nil. This mission was more like a practice mission or a scenic tour than a combat mission. The target was German strongholds down in southern France, which we have had surrounded for months, but haven't bothered to waste the men and materials or just starving them out. The French forces decided they wanted their labor back, so we went down to bust up the Jerry's Defiance for the Frenchmen. At least it did give me an opportunity to see southern France. Beautiful country, but has really felt the effects of this war. Passed over St. Lo, where Patton made his headlines in the France breakthrough. I said 16th of April, Bordeaux, France, another milk run. Wish we had more like it. Kelly didn't have a map of this one. I don't know whether he lost it or whether he didn't get one or what, but anyway, I don't have one. Well, or lucky 13, I mean, or unlucky 13 is coming up. So I think maybe I'll kind of think that over a little bit for a while, so I can see if I can remember and get the story straight. About forgot the briefing sheet on that last mission. Here we are flying deputy lead of the low squadron right here. Opiera probably would have been along again, that one. Yeah, mission number 13, it was a dandy. 17th of April, 1945, 8 hours and 45 minutes in the air. Target, Dresden, Germany. Bombed visual. Altitude 22,000. Black intense. The roughest mission yet. Had the earmarks of a rough one from the start. Our 13th and one of the roughest targets left in Germany. It was a beautiful day, if you can think of it that way. Visual all the way to the target area. Got into target area and ran into contrails and lost the rest of our group. Overrun the primary IP. That was the primary initial point where you turn onto the bomb wheel. So, and was coming near flak area. Lead navigator told air leader to change course to IP, but saw other planes to our right and tried to join them and ran us through one of the heaviest flak areas in Germany. It's a little tough to read, you have to bear with me. We got the hell shot out of us. We had a burst in the forward part of the waist which busted the fuse box and all electrical wires, knocking all the radio equipment and cut the control cables. Had a burst on number 2 engine which knocked it out. One burst near number 3 engine which narrowly missed knocking it out. Part of the burst went through under Clem's side window, cutting his flying jacket under his arm. Cutting his oxygen hose, went through his flak suit and hit Ward on the arm. Also went through his Mae West, a narrow escape. A miracle that he wasn't killed. We were so badly crippled by this time we could no longer keep up with the formation, so we had to turn back. All of my navigation equipment had been shot out, so I had to use DR, dead reckoning, and a prayer to get us out of enemy territory where we could let down to where we could see the ground. Luck was with us, and of course that indivisible th crewman, God. And when we broke out of the contrails and picked up contact with the ground, we were right on our brief course. We also had received a hit in number 4 gas tank, and we were losing gas rather rapidly. We sweated gas and the 3 remaining engines all the way across Germany and Belgium. By cool efficiency on every crew member's part, we got back to the base safely. Upon landing, all the gunners jumped out and kissed the ground in gratification. I too felt the same for old Mother Earth. Pollock, that's Brzezinski, the tail gunner. The tail gunner also had a very narrow escape. He received a hit on the right side of his head, and luckily his flak helmet stopped it, but he escaped with a knot and a slight abrasion. No 13. I'll also respect that number. You and I rode a little bit longer on after that mission. 17th of April 1945, number 13, Dresden, Germany. I think I'm about the luckiest man there is alive. We got lost and they led us over the Brooks flak area. We didn't have on our flak suits when it started bursting. I got on my flak suit and was putting on my flak helmet when the one burst hit. This one piece came just below the window on my side, cutting all the wires to my radio jack box. It then went just under my arm, cutting my jacket, my flying jacket, electric suit, and would have torn my arm off if I hadn't had my right arm up a little bit, putting on my helmet, my flak helmet. It then hit my flak suit and went clean through that. It then hit my oxygen hose, cutting it about half in two, and jerked the end fastener clear out. Then it hit my Midwest, cutting a hole in it. From there it seemed to follow my flak suit around the inside and dropped out in the passageway. Later on we found a nick in the birch steering pedestal where it hit that. It sort of stunned me for a minute, but I then looked down and saw all the damage. The first thing I did was start looking for my oxygen system and trying to get some oxygen before I passed out. I carried the broken piece. No, I grabbed the broken hose, held my hand over the hole, and sucked on it. I had to suck on it for about half an hour before we got a new hose hooked up to my regulator. Actually, where it was cut, the hose was cut, I put that in my mouth, took off the oxygen mask and put that in my mouth, and just sucked out of the hose. Actually, Big Slim, armor gunner and top turret gunner, not armor gunner, but engineer and top turret gunner. He got a walk-around bottle and hooked up to that, and then gave me his mask so I could plug it in, because I couldn't talk. We had a lot of things going on with the airplane. We had to be able to talk to Bert, and I had to do a lot of conversing there. While all of this was happening, the number 2 prop was running away, and I had one hand on that. Oil was pouring out of the number 2 engine. Number 3 was running rough as gas was pouring out of number 3 and 4 main tanks. About this time, Ward decided to head for home as we couldn't keep up with the formation. Kelly did a swell job putting us on course back. On the way back, number 2 started to burn, but we got it feathered in time. One burst hit back under the waist, putting a hole through the side about a foot long, and it went out and it cut all the wires to number 103 fuse box. A piece came up through the tail and hit Pollock on the flak helmet and put a nice bump on his head. The gas tanks sealed themselves pretty well, and we got home okay. I have the piece of flak as a souvenir. I carried it for many years, and finally it got lost. The plane was covered with flak holes. We had to shoot the colors of the day when we came over the coast so that the English wouldn't shoot us down. If we came over, you know, singly, they thought it could have been Germans and they would have shot us down. So we shot our flares and they know it was us. Wisely had to crank the flaps down because all of our power was shot out. About everything on a B-17 is electric except the brakes and the cowl flaps, engine cowl flaps. That was quite a mission. We didn't want any more like that, I can tell you. It really wanted us, we were ready to get our missions over and go home somewhere or another. One engine we thought was on fire, was going to be on fire. It was just bellowing out smoke, so we feathered it, but then we could see it would be real nice to have a third engine possibly in landing and so forth. So we fired it up again, and what happened, it cut an oil line that was pouring oil onto the exhaust stacks. And so when we got back close to the base, we fired it up again, and it ran till and didn't catch on fire till we got landed. I know Kelly was talking about the contrails. That was one of those situations. There were so many planes coming in there, they'd come in ahead of us, and they'd created an overcast, and we got into that overcast. Our squadrons had to split off because you'd just be running into each other. So that's the way our squadron got lost and taken over their own area. I mentioned a big shell that went through the waist. It come up through the side of it and ripped a big hole, looked like about a foot wide and fairly long, right kind of through the side of the plane, then went right up through the top, cutting all the big main bundle of wires that went down through. And but the good Lord was with us. The altitude wasn't set right, so it evidently went off up way above us, or someplace above us. But if it had gone off close to us, we'd been done for. Then they were looking at the plane after we got back, and they figured it was I think they said 155 millimeter naval gun that went through. And the Germans, you know, they had all kinds of big guns mounted on railroad cars, and they moved them all over. And it was also talking about we got hit in one of the props. I think it was number 3 prop, I'm not sure. It ran away, and that's what happens. They just get out of control, and evidently the pitch control and so forth has been damaged. So if they get to going too fast, they'll start to windmill, and you can't stop them. They'll get going so fast that they'll fly apart, and then they'll come right through the place. And we worried about those because we were right. Both pilots were right in line with those 2 props. They'd cut the plane in 2 if they went the right direction. But I was able to tone it down, and then it come back up into it easy, and it hung in there then. So we lucked out there too. Polak Brzezinski, a few years back, he pursued this bump on the head he got, and there was an abrasion, so he put in for a Purple Heart and got it after many years. Yeah, we come in over here. That looked like Brussels right there. Come on down here and across, wander way up through the big flak areas. And that's Dresden right there. That's where we bombed. And there's Leipzig up there, if that tells you a little more where we're at. Come back on route, back home. Yeah, on this mission we were flying deputy lead again, right here on the high squadron. So Alpha Area was probably with us again. Mission number 14. This was our last combat mission. Of course, we didn't know it at this time, but number 14 was 21st of April, 1945. We were 10 hours in the air. Target, marshalling yard at Ingolstadt near Munich, Germany. Bomb PFF radar. Altitude 19,000. Flak none. A lot better mission than number 13. A milk run for us as far as flak is concerned. But it wasn't a milk run. This was the longest haul yet, 10 hours in the air. Briefing at 2 a.m. and returned to the base at 1600 and 1800 by the time we finished interrogation and critiquing. Let's see, 16 hours is a long time. Nothing exciting about the mission. Had bad weather and had to bypass first and second priority targets and go to the third. Had to fly in the tops of the clouds practically all the way back. Yeah, look, from my notes here, it looked like Kelly had a little bit different version of the mission than I did because he didn't have to fly the plane. But number 14, 21st of April, 45, Munich. One of the longest missions this group has pulled, 10 hours in the air. The weather was very bad. Only about 350 of the 900 planes that started out got to the target. Flying formation in the clouds a lot of the time, and the windshields would ice up. It would cause very bad vertigo. Bombed PFF, and there was no flak. Went over the Alp Mountains, which were covered with snow and very beautiful. But our group got assembled and stuff, and then some of the groups got into clouds. There were probably a little different altitudes and so forth, but that's why only part of the planes got there. And you'd fly in formation and you'd go in and out of these clouds. It was rough. You tried to slide out a little bit to the side, but you didn't want to go out too far, and try and keep a level course and hope the heck that you popped out pretty soon before you run into somebody. If you stayed in too long, you just had to ease out and be on your own. And then the windshields kept icing for us some. And when you're in the clouds that way with no horizon, anything, or a clouds, a level of clouds or something that you can't, you lose sense of up and down, and that's what they call vertigo. And it's real bad stuff, man. I think maybe I was telling you about that earlier on, but boy, you get vertigo and try to fly a formation, it's a killer. But we'd trade off. When one guy'd get it, while you'd trade off, and the other guy could fly until he'd get it. But if you seemed like if you'd shut your eyes and shake your head a few times, then you could get over it. But that's what causes 9 out of 10 of small plane accidents in the United States now. They get vertigo, and they think they're flying straight and level, but they're can be upside down, or they fly straight in the ground and think they're going straight and level. Now, a person can get a very mild case of vertigo when you're driving in the mountains. You think your car is going uphill and boy, it's going like crazy, or else you think you're going downhill and the old engine just pulling down and you're going up a steep grade, because in the mountain you can't, all around you can't get any exact horizon. You can get a general horizon and you get mild cases of it, but that's what it is. I don't know, if you're probably not going to be watching this whole tape, one I did for training, the first case of vertigo I had, I'll repeat this. We were training BT-13s, two-seat trainer, and we were flying instruments, and we'd go up, and the cadet in the back would have a hood over his head, and you couldn't see out, and you had to do all kinds of flying. And then they'd have one cadet ride in the front cockpit to keep her from running into somebody. But I was doing steep turns and everything, and boy, all of a sudden, for some strange reason, the gravel was falling up at me out of the bottom of the airplane, and my seatbelt was just tugging on me, and I was completely over on my back and didn't know about it. And this kid, he was let me go a long ways before I pulled that hood off and got out of there. It's a spooky feeling, but that's why instrument pilots, people that fly in weather, have to keep competent on instruments, and they can't go away from it for a while. They have to keep practicing it and learn to overcome the feeling and believe your instruments. That's hard sometimes. You'll be sitting leaning on one side of the seat and cross-controlling and everything else to keep that plane where it's supposed to be. Oh, I mentioned we were coming back from that mission, and We were evidently close to Switzerland because the Alps mountains were sticking up through those beautiful billowy clouds, and the late afternoon sun was shining on them, and I think that was about the prettiest sight I'd ever seen in my life. It was just unreal, with the snow-capped mountains sticking up through those clouds. And I wish I had a video camera in those days. Yeah, let's see. Can't see hardly any names on there. There's Brussels up clear up here. So as you can see, we come in here and went quite a ways south, clear down in here, and I'm assuming that's Munich right there with that big flak area. That was our bomb trip right back here. Yeah, here we are again, up in deputy lead for the whole group again, right up here. And Ophir would have been along again. Never gave too much thought about it, but Ophir must have been a pretty darn good rated bombardier to be flying the deputy leads all the time. So. Let's see if it was running. That was the end of our actual combat missions. Then VE Day came along, and there were some wild celebrations. I know at our air base, we were on the base at the time, and we were restricted. We couldn't leave, but the guys went wild. They had the berry pistols, shooting them out all over everything like fireworks. And they set a couple of the houses on fire, which was too bad. But you know, the farmhouses there all had the big, thick, thatched roofs, and they made a pretty good bonfire. That was a shame, but it happened. And in London, I guess that was really wild, but we didn't get to get in on any of that. I never did figure out why, but they decided the whole group should take a night flight over Europe. I don't know, was to keep us confident or what, but we all took off and flew over Europe. I don't remember where or why we went, but we were over Europe at night, and boy, we got surrounded by thunderstorms, and all the things that we could do then was, they said the best place to try to get through them was to go, you know, a big cumulus of cloud will come up, and they call it an anvil, goes out to the top of it, and they says to try to go through them right below the anvil. But anyway, we took a shot at it, and I think we were about, as I remember, 8,000 feet when we went into this thing, and boy, I'm telling you, it was lightning and everything and rough. And all of a sudden our altimeter just started unwinding, and it just seemed like we were flying along normal, but we dropped from 8,000 feet down to 4,000 feet, and we had to hold power and trying to climb, but we still dropped from 8 to 4,000 feet. And sometimes those downdrafts and those big thunderstorms will go clear to the ground, but luckily enough, suddenly at about 4,000 feet, we got through it and got out of that downdraft, and we're okay. But that was a real scary experience, I'll tell you. I don't know, I'm kind of forgetting what I talked about, but I don't remember the mission. And I guess I didn't put it in my notes. But on one mission we were coming home, and we'd gotten back just almost to England. We were flying kind of loose formation, and the gunners, they all had to tear down their 50 caliber machine guns and clean them, so they felt safe. They were already doing that and had them scattered over around the waist in the plane, and our group was going along, and we could see another line of bombers. It was several groups. Another wing or something was coming across way up ahead of us, and Bert and I was sitting there so relaxed and tooting along, flying loose formation, and all of a sudden our plane just completely dropped, went off on one wing, and it dropped so fast that Bert and I were both, I had our seatbelts on, which was a no-no. One of us should have had them. It buckled, but both of us were stuck tight against the top of the plane. We were falling so fast, and good old Lord was with us, I guess. But it scattered the guys around in the back with all their guns and everything, but they got banged. I don't know whether they got bruised up or not, but they weren't very happy about it. But we lucked out, and the thing flattened out a little bit enough it flopped us back down to where we could grab the controls again. But that's a sad feeling. You're stuck up against the top of that plane and couldn't reach the controls or anything. So that was another close experience. One other mission, I guess that was the closest incident we had for pilot error, where we just about piled it up. We had a mission, was all lined up out there, and they'd give you the green light on your plane to go and stuff, but they gave the whole group the red light and was delaying us for a while, so they said leave your engines running. And of course all those planes, 40 planes out there lined up, the wind and dirt and dust was blowing, and the controls were flopping up and down. We had to hold them, and anyway, finally we got to go ahead and got our turn to take off, and we'd been through our whole checklist and everything. We wheeled out and pushed everything to the wall and took off, started down the runway, and Bert was taking off, and all of a sudden he started to holler. He says, "I can't get my wing up." Well, we were going off the ground, but the one wing was dropping. And I grabbed we have control locks, 2 control locks down there, and I grabbed, and luckily enough I got it in time. But we had the ailerons locked, so he couldn't level out the wings and level up the plane until that got out. But that wing was awful close to the ground when we got it straightened out. But Bert said he didn't lock them, and I know I didn't, so that's where it stood. That was a close one. I just looked at some old notes. I just scratched down things to talk about, but well, maybe I've talked about it already. But an airplane, probably had four engines, and you have to have them all running at the same speed, or they go and this drives you wild and causes vibration in the plane. But you can't do it with your RPM gauges. You just can't get them that close, because it has to be almost perfect. But there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can do it by sound. Usually if you get 2 on one side synchronized, and then synchronize on the other, 2 on the other side, they'll be alright. But there's 2 ways we could do it. We could do it by sound, by getting close and then adjusting one or the other until you get that sound away and the vibration away. And the other was, we could look right out through and look through one propeller and the other propeller, and you could see kind of a shadow going round and round, and you could just adjust them until you could stop that shadow, and then you knew they were both running exactly the same RPM. Here's another little story I don't have crossed out yet, but maybe I've told it. But we go to London a lot, but we also went to Cambridge. It was a little closer than London, and we could get over there quicker and spend a few nights and days over there. But one night over there, we were roaming around, and this little restaurant there had a big sign up, hamburgers. Boy, the guys were flocking in there, so of course it's been a long time since we'd had a hamburger, so we joined the crowd. I think that was Kelly and I. We used to run around quite a bit together. didn't think much about it, but the next day at the base there's a big notice up on the bulletin board that says not to eat any hamburgers at Cambridge, that they'd been serving cat meat the day before. So I guess we had a little cat meat and survived, but it tasted like it had a lot of filler in it. I don't know what they had in with the cat meat, but hope I don't have to eat any more. I sure can't remember whether I talked about these, but in the Quonset huts there we lived in, they were cold, and we had just cots in there, and boy, it was chilly, and we'd gather up these big old heavy English blankets. I had 7 of them I'd finally confiscated around here and there, and after some guys checked out, and we'd hang the blankets clear down over them and hang them so they touched the floor, and that seemed to really help to keep any air from moving under the bed. Heat we had in there was a couple of little stoves. They were about that big around, stood about 3 feet high, with a stack out the top, and we had coke to burn. It wasn't like coal, it was coke, and boy, it was hard to get started. But if you get it to rolling, it just would really get hot, and it lasted quite a long, and that round stove would be red hot, just glow red. Yeah, so you know me, I'm always figuring out things to do. But our latrines there, we had to shave because of the oxygen mask. We had to shave regularly, or they'd just rub your face raw. But we didn't have any hot water, so I went out to the edge of the base there, and there's an old wrecked plane, and I yanked out a whole bunch of tubing, like it was about 1/4-inch tubing, and it was for oxygen lines in the plane. I got a batch of that, and I found an old oxygen bottle, and this is the stove right here, and here's the stack out of it. I got this tubing, and I wound it round and round and round that stove, real tight to it. Well, I guess it was down so that we could put the coke in up there. But anyway, one end of it, the bottom end of it, I took it out. No, let's see, the top. Yeah, I got that wrong. Anyway, I took the top end of this, should go up here and dumped into the top of the stove. So when that, and then the bottom end, it come out of here and went in to here. So as this got hot, the water would come out of here and go up and dump into this oxygen tank that I had right here, and I had a hole in there so we could dump water in it. But that got hot, it would go up and around and drop it back in there, and then come back on down to the bottom, and it gets going around there 90 miles an hour until that was all hot. Then I had a spigot on the side that I could drain the water off. So, boy, that works slicker than a whistle. You get 2 or 3 gallons of hot water in a little while. But the only problem was after you drain that water, you couldn't get all the water out of those lines. And a few drops would get down in and it just sound like an explosion. It'd go kerbam and shoot her back up again, and kerbam. It had to go on for about an hour before it would finally get it all blown out of there, and the guys give me heck. But they kind of backed off pretty soon. We'd start using it earlier in the evening, because they started using the water out of it too. But it worked, and we had some hot water to shave with. We flew the B-17G, that was the last model produced, and but they had an old B-17F, which didn't have the chin turned on it, but this old, we call it the Green Hornet, because it still had the old green army type paint on it, but they stripped out all the armament and the guns and everything out, bomb racks, and it was really as light as a feather. And that little son of a gun would go, but we flew it now and then, and they used it for runs I think they went to Scotland and different places for whiskey runs and this and that for the base. But and when somebody had to go someplace, they'd usually fly it because it'd go faster. But we flew it now and then and just go up cruising around. And the Lancaster is a German or a English bomber, 4-engine bomber, and they were just a little faster than we were. And a lot of times when you'd be up there, well, one of them pull up alongside of you, and they'd kind of egg you on a little bit, and then pretty soon they'd just pour on the cobs and they could creep away from us. But so when we had the old Green Hornet up, we'd pulled the stunt and got back with them, and we'd pull up alongside one of them and wiggle our wings and this and that, and they'd pour on the cobs, you know, like they was going to take off, and we'd just pour them on. We could just walk off from them, leave them sitting there, because that whole thing would really go. I probably mentioned the buzz bombs before, but I just can't remember. Buzz bombs were the bomb, the unmanned bomb that German would send out. It was a little, like it shaped like a wings on a bomb, what it mounted to with an engine on it. Yeah, it would come over, and it was the most clankety banging thing you didn't know what made it run. It was just clanking and coming, but they flew at low altitude, and they just put so much gas in when they run out of gas, then they'd crash in England with a bomb. And right outside of our hut, we had just cement walls up, as I remember, about high as your head, but with just openings in, and you could go and beat it out from your hut and go out and get in that, so the buzz bombs, if they hit somewhere in the area, it would stop the shrapnel from coming and getting you. But I think I went out there a couple times, but at night you could hear them coming, and you're okay, you'd lay there and listen to them. But if they were fairly close and you heard that engine stop, you made a beeline. It was supposed to make a beeline for that shelter out there. They were all, most of them they sent towards London, but there were a few in our area. As soon as you got over there, why, I had a 1051 rating, which is co-pilot. Bert had a 1091, but it was once you flew a mission that you were eligible to be qualified as a 1091, and that's all you had to do is go get somebody, one of the staff officers, and fly with you. Just take the plane off and fly it around the base and back and land, and that's all it took to get your 1091 rating. But Bert kept putting me off, and I don't know. Bert liked to be the man, which is fine. But so at the officers club one night, I grabbed one of the guys and I said, "What does it take to get checked out?" And he said, "Well, no problem, just take a ride." And I said, "Well, I've been put it off, so I'll be darned about the next day." You must talk to Bert, because Bert says, "I think it's time you should go take your ride and get your 1091. And so I did. Bert says, "Well, I was trying to put you off because I was afraid if I got my 1091, why, they might grab me and give me my own crew." Anyway, I got it. Never see whether that camera's on or off. After VE Day, they had a problem over in Europe because the portion of Germany that Russia took over, Germany had enslaved thousands of German or French people to work in their factories and forced them to, and we called it slave labor. And all the Frenchmen that were in the Russian sector that they'd captured, Russia just took them and herded them over the line in Austria, where the line was where we were at and where Russia was at, and dumped them into Austria in our section. They could care less. So there were thousands of them milling around there. So they sent us, our group, down to in Austria. I suppose they sent a lot of other groups too. But we were supposed to go down there and fly them back to France. And so we went down. We just had a scouting crew. I think it was just about 4 of us went. And boy, I'm telling you, they were a sorry mess. They had cardboard tied around their feet and rags for clothes, and they were really hurting. You really felt sorry for them. But they were allowed, and then they took our bomb bay and they put some doors down, just wooden doors down the bottom of our bomb bay, so they were allowed to take with them what they could carry. They could carry on, and that was it. And they'd have to throw all their stuff in the bomb bay. They filled it up, but I can't remember just how many we brought. But it seemed like it was 20 some, if I remember right. But they were so bad. Oh, and then they sent big canisters. It seemed like it was about that big around and so long, with big pumps on, and they had DDT in them. So we had to line them up and really dust them, stick it down in their clothes and all over them, and shut their eyes. And we just completely, because they were so full of lice and everything else, you couldn't believe it. So we loaded them all up and got ready to take off, and we got out, waiting our turn in line to take off, and here come a Jeep roaring out, and some guys sitting in there, and they had 4 POWs that they'd just gotten out of some camp, and they wanted to see if we wouldn't take them back so they'd get them out of there. And so yeah, we'd take them. We said that we were loaded, all we were supposed to take, but we put them on, and well, I'm telling you, when we took off, that's the scariest takeoff I've ever felt, and it plane didn't feel right, because it was so loaded, but it wasn't loaded properly. We had way too much weight back in the waist. Maybe it was a good thing those guys came along, because they were up. We had them standing up behind us, but boy, that thing come off of the ground, and it just wallowed and back and forth, and I just knew it was going to stall, but it hung in there, and we got off all right. But boy, that was bad news, and felt sorry for him. One of them had been in a prison camp for 4 years. I think he was an Australian, and of course they told us to dump him off in France for the rest of them. But those guys says, "Oh, please don't do that," you know, because they would be forever getting out of there. They'd get in with all the other Americans trying to get shipped out. They called them Lucky Strike camps. It took them forever to get shipped home. So, well, he says, nobody told us for sure where to dump you. So he said, when we land and they unload all these Frenchmen, why, you stay hid down up here by the cockpit. You squat down and hide up here, and they did. So we took them back to Inglis with them to our air base, and the guy says, "Well, what are you doing bringing them over here?" And we said, "Well, nobody told us where to take them. We didn't think they should be in France." But boy, were they ever grateful to us, because boy, they got showers and food, and they were on their way to wherever they went. So, oh, that's that group that the Frenchmen we loaded on there. We'd go back, and they were all sitting back there in the waist and scattered around. And there's one gal they weren't even close to, but she was a pretty nice looking gal. But she was sick, and she'd thrown up, but boy, they didn't have anything to do with her. We got enough out of some of them that we could kind of halfway converse with. And they said, well, she'd been fraternizing with the German officers, and boy, they just didn't give her the time of day, I'll tell you. I keep thinking of a few things every now and then. I don't know how many planes were shot down out of our group while I was there. I've got a book on the history of the 486 bomb group. I could probably figure that out, but on the same day that we got shot up so bad on our 13th mission, another crew was shot down that day. It was the Dick Albright crew, and one of those things. They were standby that day in case some plane didn't run right or something where they had to fly, and of course they standby, but they flew that day, and it was over Dresden.